On Saturday morning, August 19, 2017, Norberta Greywind looked at her 22-year-old pregnant daughter struggling to climb the stairs to her third-floor neighbor's apartment complex. Savannah was 8 months pregnant. August had been unusually hot, and she could barely walk on her swollen legs. A few hours later, William Hahn, the boyfriend of Brooke Cruz, the same neighbor who had invited Savannah over, came up the same stairs. When he entered the apartment, he found Brooke scrubbing the bathroom, Savannah's bloody, shredded body lying on the floor, and a basin with a baby in it on top of the toilet lid. Upon seeing William, Brooke picked up the infant and held it out to him with the words, "This is our baby. This is our family. Please help me." Against any healthy logic, William helped clean up the blood, carry bags of bloody towels and clothes out of the apartment, wrap bags around Savannah's body, securing them with duct tape and ropes, and later, dispose of the corpse. Today's story is about the tragic intersection of the lives of two contrasting couples. The dark one, with a sticky, heavy, irresponsible, and unhealthy past defining their present, and the light one, loving, easy, and open. The result, broken families, and the death that accompanied the birth. The day after the deed, William Hahn announced to his co-workers that his spouse had given birth to a little girl named Phoenix. In some macabre irony, the couple who took Savannah's life and daughter away from her named the child after the mythological bird with the ability to die and be reborn. Later in the interview, Brooke's boyfriend would describe his days with Hazley, as her family would call the girl, as beautiful days. "That baby made me a happy little family man for 2 days. It's been great. I never thought I'd ever experience that again." Savannah Greywind was born on August 9, 1995 in Burke County, North Dakota. Savannah's father is an ordinary white American and her mother is from the Spirit Lake Sioux Indian tribe. The girl had 2 brothers, Joy and Casey, and the younger sister Kayla. The parents, Norberta and Joe, were very proud of their children. The family lived in Fargo, North Dakota until Savannah was 9 years old. Then, in 2005, they moved to Spirit Lake Reservation, Spirit Lake, a Native American Indian place in the eastern part of the state. Savannah adored nature and animals, especially horses. On the reservation, the girl met Ashton Mayton. The couple met when Savannah was 15 years old, and since then, they have not parted. When it was time for the young people to go to college, the family moved back to Fargo. Savannah found a job caring for the elderly at a nursing home, studying to become a nurse, and preparing to take the exam in September. By this time, Savannah was a happy young woman expecting her firstborn. She and Ashton had found an apartment, put down a deposit, and planned to move into their own family nest in early September. For now, Savannah was staying with her parents on the bottom floor of a 7-unit, 3-story apartment building. It was in this building on the 3rd floor that 38-year-old Brooke Cruz and 33-year-old William Hahn rented an apartment. No one is born evil. A person is the result of experiences that make them who they are. Brooke Cruz has created a woman within herself capable of such gruesome murder. Wanting to find wholeness through accepting all sides of her personality, she nurtured a dark side step by step that she couldn't control. Perhaps there are 2 different personalities within each of us, darkness and light. I believe we are predestined to have dark and light thought processes that manifest as personalities. One of them is socially destroyed quite early on. But is that a good thing? Brooke wrote in one of her pieces, "Ever since she was a child, Brooke was drawn to mysticism and found a special beauty in the crimes of serial killers and high IQ maniacs. As an adult, she had already studied the psychology of criminals professionally and strived to learn to think like them so she could understand them. Brooke said that if Ted Bundy came to see her, she would definitely help him. But Brooke Cruz, alas, was not a healthy, stable person herself. All the lived information was downloaded into the personality, which was characterized by impulsive behavior, anxious avoidance, irascibility, frequent changes of partners and places of work, inability to finish what she had started. The young woman tried to fight it, made discipline lists, and even followed them for a while, but eventually fell off again. By the time she was 38, she was overwhelmed by depression, physical illness, exhaustion from unhealthy relationships that included regular physical abuse, and a disturbing fear of losing her partner because she couldn't get pregnant and give birth. Brooke couldn't take it anymore. Darkness and light mingled. Killing a pregnant woman was seen as one way to get the infant she wanted. After her arrest, Brooke's apartment was left with a stack of books ranging from clinical, criminal, forensic, and legal psychology to obstetrics. In a desk drawer, she found notes listing birthing kit items such as scissors, blades, clamps, and gloves, an infant cardiopulmonary resuscitation bag, and the hormone oxytocin. Brooke Lynn Cruz grew up in Florida's Bradenton-Sarasota neighborhood, where her mother, Paula Nelson, still lives, according to Christmas cards. Her parents divorced, and 7 children, including Brooke, were left to live with their mother. According to the recollections of one of her sisters, the family lived quite well, according to diary entries Brooke kept throughout her later life. She had a difficult childhood, which she tries hard to forget. Transition age changed the caring, open-minded girl, made her testy but not aggressive. Brooke became a troubled teenager, and she was the only one of all the children who decided to move in with her father, whom her mother called a professional criminal. Life with her father didn't work out, and she found herself in and out of foster homes. From that point on, the siblings pretty much lost touch with Brooke. They only learned that Brooke is the mother of at least 7 children from a news story about a shocking crime. At the age of 15, Brooke met Aaron Edwards. In 1995, when she was about 17, she gave birth to a child in Pinellas County, Florida, left the infant with the father, and moved away. A court ordered the mother to pay child support, but Brooke did not honor the court order. She will remember her daughter when she turns 14, and their communication will be limited to a few Facebook messages. In the evenings, Brooke worked as a waitress at the Chinese Dragon restaurant and as a sales representative and animal specialist at the Petland Pet Store in Bradenton, Florida. In early 2002, Brooke, 23, was jailed in Missouri for falsifying documents but was released on parole. On August 31, 2002, she was arrested again and sent to jail in Hidalgo County, Texas for parole violation. In 2006, at the age of 27, Brooke married Carl Cruz, a carpenter from Minnesota. The young woman managed to give birth to 2 children and worked as an administrative assistant in her husband's carpentry shop. The marriage, in which Brooke cheated on her husband, lasted only 3 years. The couple divorced in June 2009. The custody of the children, according to the documents, became the father, and Brooke left for California without explanation. The only thing she did carefully and diligently throughout her life was to keep diaries and record all the events that happened to her. After the terrible crime, the entries became available to the press. The diaries told of a string of lovers, home births, and abortions. There was a common point in all the stories. The relationships began with heart-shaped marks around the edges, but after a while, the entries about the men changed. Each of them started playing intellectual games with me, making me feel that I wasn't good enough, not smart enough, Brooke wrote. It's impossible to say with certainty whether Brooke chose such guys on purpose or whether any of her relationships went through such trials as a result of internal problems. However, she absolutely believed that Carl was bullying her and making her look like a bad, promiscuous mother, and this fact was perceived by her as emotionally traumatizing. However, despite this perception, she returns to her now ex-husband's house after a trip to California, registers on a dating site, and begins to study psychology in earnest. On the dating site tagged, the young woman meets Andrew Murray, a chef from Katoomba, New South Wales, Australia, and decides to move to Australia in late 2011. In January 2012, in an argument that erupted over a child custody issue, Brooke grabbed a knife and attacked her ex-husband. Police arrested the woman and filed criminal charges. Brooke denied the knife attack, but chose not to wait for a court hearing and fled to Australia on false immigration papers, where she married Andrew. The Australian marriage lasted exactly 6 months. Andrew found out about her American past, husband, children, and fake immigration papers. After discovering the truth, his wife, according to Andrew, began threatening him with arrest for aiding and abetting, causing him to even go to the police and tell them everything just in case. The marriage is remembered by Andrew for the huge amount of talk about maniacs. He would later reveal that as early as 2012, Brooke was already obsessed with crime. She studied psychology and nursing, did her thesis on serial killers from her words. She was always reading books about maniacs and crime and could tell you anything about them. I thought she became more and more aggressive as time went on. In total, it took 6 months and 10 days from the time she arrived until she returned to the U.S. in October 2012. On September 22, 2012, Brooke made a diary entry where she wrote that she had changed significantly for the better. After returning from Australia, she was engaged in a lengthy custody battle for her 2 children. She may have had a chance for a new life if she reconciled with Andrew Murray, but in late 2012, Brooke met 28-year-old William Hone, who had been convicted of child abuse a few months earlier after he brought his son to the hospital in January 2011 with a fractured skull near his right ear. Brooke falls in love with this guy who is twice divorced, has 2 kids, doesn't pay child support, has anger issues, and a court order for no contact with his children. Brooke is full of energy and desire to be her new self, take the kids, and take steps in that direction, and finds a job. In 2013, Brooke turns a hobby into a profession and enrolls at Minnesota State University in Moorhead, where she takes courses such as social behavior, physiological psychology, cognitive theory, psychology of deviant behavior, and directed research. She is particularly interested in the psychology of serial killers. The newly minted student wrote a paper on them and received the highest grade. Only her personal life clouds the picture. The relationship with William began beautifully. "We have such a relationship with him, which is nice for children. We're loving. We don't yell at each other. We're affectionate and kind," Brooke said. But over time, the relationship turned into codependency, the joint use of alcohol and illegal substances. Brooke thought she was doing well, but felt worse and worse. She started avoiding her children, changed jobs because she couldn't get along with the staff, and became more and more immersed in her psychological research into the darker sides of humanity. On December 23, 2014, she lost her custody battle. Judge Waldemar of the Otter Tail County Courthouse granted temporary sole physical and sole legal custody of the children to their father, Carl. That same day, Brooke suffered a panic attack and was taken to the hospital emergency room with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, according to medical records. Years later, after her trial for the murder, she would say it was the events in 2014 that were the turning point in her life, when she lost the ability to control her impulses and evaluate her actions. But what those events were, Brooke did not elaborate. In January 2015, in her diary will appear entry, "I feel like I started this relationship with a purse full of love coins, and slowly but surely this purse is empty, and I just have nothing to give. Our intimacy is not the same as before. About once a week he makes time for me. The intimacy lasts about 7 to 15 minutes. He doesn't care at all about my satisfaction." Brooke complained of inattention and became increasingly withdrawn. 5 months later, she was diagnosed with gallbladder disease, and physical and psychological deterioration set in. Brooke practically stopped leaving the house. In May 2016, police responded to a call. William Hahn had brutally beaten his girlfriend in the bathroom. He pleaded guilty to assault and was banned from approaching Brooke. 6 months later, police came again on a neighbor's call and found Hahn in Brooke's apartment. He pleaded guilty to violating the restraining order. And then they got back together, and there was no longer a healthy moment in the relationship. Brooke was unable to have children after having an abortion in 2011. William, on the other hand, constantly demanded a child from her. In early 2017, after another fight, Brooke lied to Hahn about the pregnancy to keep him from leaving, and even emailed a fake ultrasound picture and a picture of a positive pregnancy test. She found a recording of some random baby's heartbeat online and showed it to her partner, saying it was the heartbeat of their future child. In August 2017, they had another big fight, by which time it was obvious that there was no pregnancy. But since William had already told everyone around about the future paternity and did not want to look like a laughingstock, he literally demanded a child from his girlfriend, mentioning the pregnant neighbor 3 floors below. Brooke Cruz would later tell police officers that she took William's demand as an ultimatum and a desire to take the baby away from Savannah, even though he didn't say so directly. Brooke had medical knowledge, and she set about compiling a list of what she needed to induce labor. By now, she was used to anticipating and doing whatever her young lover wanted her to do. On a Saturday afternoon in August, Brooke knocked on the door of a downstairs apartment and offered Savannah $20 for serving as a model for a dress Brooke was supposedly sewing. Savannah accepted. Before going upstairs to her neighbor's apartment, Savannah ordered a pizza, expecting to grab a bite when she got home an hour later to drive her younger brother to work. The mom-to-be didn't return by the planned time. The brother went upstairs on his own around 2:30 in the afternoon. He heard the sound of a sewing machine, but no one opened the door. A few minutes later, Savannah's father, Joe, also went upstairs and knocked on the door. Brooke yelled out that they were still working on the dress. Savannah was trying it on, and that was why no one could come to the door. Norberta drove her son to work herself. When she returned home, she found the pizza untouched, texted her daughter a few times, and after getting no response, went upstairs. A neighbor opened the door and explained that Savannah had long since left as soon as they finished their fitting. An anxious Norberta went downstairs to her apartment and looked around. Her shoes, purse, car keys, and belongings were all left in the apartment. Savannah couldn't go for a walk because the heat and swelling made it painful and difficult for her to walk. Norberta called Ashton, hoping he was the one who had picked up her daughter, but the young man replied that she wasn't answering him either. The worried mother called the police and began driving around the streets looking for her pregnant daughter, who may have suddenly become ill. I was driving and I thought, well, if she had gone somewhere, I would have found her nearby, but deep down I knew she hadn't gone anywhere. Later that day, police searched Brooke and William's apartment because it was Savannah's last known location. The landlady welcomed them in and did not obstruct them, but the police, lacking a warrant, did not look in closets or behind closed doors. The police department explained to the family that Savannah was of age and old enough to make her own decisions without informing family members. Because there was no evidence that any crime had occurred in or near the home, investigators concluded that the young woman had gone somewhere voluntarily. Savannah's family saw the indifference with which the department's officers were working, and it was very upsetting to them. The police returned to search the apartment 2 more times and came out empty-handed. William Hohn would later testify that during one of the searches, he hid the infant in a suitcase and Savannah's body in a dresser from which all the shelves had been removed. 2 days after the brutal murder, the couple would drive the dresser with Savannah's body to a bridge over the Red River and dump it in the water. On August 23, 2017, William's co-workers told police that he had blabbed about having a baby at home. That same day, residents of the apartment building heard a baby crying from apartment #5 and immediately notified police. The information received allowed the officers to obtain a warrant and return to the familiar apartment already, with a serious, thorough search during which a live newborn baby girl was found. Brooke didn't hold back and revealed that Savannah herself had given her the baby 2 days after her disappearance. According to her, Savannah didn't want this baby, and that day when she came to help with sewing a dress, she asked Brooke how she could induce labor on her own. Then she left and showed up 2 days later at 3 a.m. with the baby in her arms and handed him to Brooke. The couple was arrested and Savannah was reported missing. The baby was taken to a local hospital and placed in the temporary custody of Cass County Social Services. A few days later, a DNA test confirmed parentage, and the girl was reunited with her father. For 3 more days, police and hundreds of local residents combed the valley looking for Savannah. Please check your property, buildings, garages, outbuildings for any signs of entry or any indication that someone has been there. Landlords, please check your vacant apartments that you may have for any signs of entry or evidence that someone has been there. If you are willing to check your dumpsters, we ask the public to help with that, Chief Todd said at the press conference. On August 27th, 8 days after Savannah's disappearance, fishermen came across a body wrapped in plastic on the Red River near Harwood. Savannah was identified by a tattoo on her leg that read, "Too beautiful for Earth." On August 28th, Brooke Cruz and William Hohn were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to kidnap, and providing false information to police. The couple began to confess. Brooke said she instigated the altercation by accusing pregnant Savannah of stealing mail and mistreating her cat. The verbal argument turned into a physical scuffle, and Brooke pushed her. Savannah, falling, hit her head on the bathroom sink and lost consciousness. Brooke then took a knife and removed the baby, making a cut from hip to hip. Savannah went in and out of consciousness as she did so. Under questioning, Brooke confirmed that William Hahn did not know of the impending plan. According to her, William came home, went into the bathroom, saw Savannah, and asked if she was alive. Brooke replied that she didn't know and asked for something to do. William left the bathroom briefly and then returned in his underwear holding a rope, which he used to strangle Savannah. In doing so, he said that if she had been breathing up to this point, she was definitely dead now. Next, Brooke said, the two of them scrubbed the floor and walls and stuffed the lifeless body into a bathroom closet. When the police knocked on the door, Brooke tried to remain calm and not worry. The officers searched the apartment but couldn't find anything. They did not have a search warrant, so the search was superficial, and the officers could not look in closets and dressers. According to the perpetrator, the child during both searches that day was under a blanket on their bed next to William. The girl was very calm and did not cry, so she was not discovered. At the time of the third inspection, August 20th, the body had already been placed inside the dresser and the infant was hidden in a suitcase. In the early morning hours of August 21st, they took the dresser down the stairs and loaded it into their Jeep Cherokee, drove it to the river and disposed of it. William Hahn denied participating in the crime. He admitted only to hiding the newborn baby girl and providing false information to law enforcement in order to cover up the crime. Brooke and William were set bail at $2 million, to which William remarked that it was an unrealistic and unreasonable amount for any ordinary person. Surprisingly, he apparently thought he deserved something reasonable after. Brooke Cruz was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. William's participation in the crime was not proven. During the trial, it was also revealed that Brooke's cellmate named Jennifer Robinson testified against her. According to the inmate's claim, Brooke mentioned that she was the one who strangled Savannah with a rope because she learned about Savannah and William's affair and thought that Savannah's child might have come from him. On September 28, 2018, a jury acquitted William, finding him not guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. However, on October 30, 2018, because he had pleaded guilty to kidnapping himself, he was sentenced to life in prison. The following spring, in May 2019, William appealed to the Supreme Court. On October 7, 2019, the sentencing review trial concluded. Judge Olson, who had originally sentenced William to life in prison, stated that despite the Supreme Court's dissent, he was still going to give him the harshest sentence possible at this time, which was 20 years in prison. Given that William has already spent 775 days behind bars, he will have to serve more than 17 more years of his 20-year sentence. Baby Hazley remained unharmed despite such an unnatural delivery. The girl is now 6 years old and goes to kindergarten. Savannah's parents and the girl's father share joint custody. The grandparents maintain a public Facebook page where they post updates on how the granddaughter is living and what she is doing. The case has become a high-profile case. Norberta is convinced that her daughter's disappearance was not taken seriously because Savannah was Native American. I feel that her disappearance was not taken as seriously as the disappearance of a white woman. I've lived in Fargo almost my whole life, and I've seen how differently Native Americans are treated. After Savannah's death, Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp introduced a bill called Savannah's Law, which was signed into law in October 2020. The bill aims to combat violence against Native American women by improving collaboration between federal, state, and tribal authorities. Norberta commented on the passage of the bill, "It's sad that my daughter had to die for people to take Native Americans seriously." When a person falls in love, they often become weaker, more vulnerable, and prone to idealizing the object of their affection. In such a state, it's difficult to critically assess the qualities of the beloved. Any negativity from their side is quickly justified, and clear problems or odd behaviors are simply ignored. Overwhelmed by feelings, we tend to overlook the shortcomings of our beloved. But if those feelings are not mutual, and the loved one is capable of deceit or criminal acts, the lover can find themselves in serious danger. Several years ago, the story of a young man named Diogo Gonalves shook all of Portugal due to its cruelty and cold-bloodedness, with two young, fragile-looking girls with angelic appearances as the ruthless perpetrators. The deceased youth and his executioners were participants in a love triangle, but do not be too quick to blame Diogo. He was not romantically involved with the two girls, but became the victim of the schemes and greed of his charming colleague, whom he loved unrequitedly, and her lover. Now, let's carefully examine this complex case from the beginning to understand how quiet and modest beauties turned into cruel criminals, robbers, and carjackers, why the victim's body was found in pieces in various places, and how a serious and prudent young man failed to realize he was lured into a deadly trap. The story of Diogo Gonalves. Diogo Gonalves was born on July 17, 1999, in the picturesque resort town of Albufeira, located in the south of Portugal. He was the only child of a simple and relatively modest family. His parents ran a small souvenir shop, so their well-being depended directly on the season and the number of tourists visiting the town. Diogo grew up modest, polite, and friendly. He did well in school, was interested in computers from a young age, and dreamed of a career in programming. People spoke of him as an open, sociable young man with many friends, both in and outside of school. He disliked being alone, hence he always sought the company of family or friends. After finishing school, the young man enrolled in a computer academy, but since the education was quite expensive, he also took a part-time job at a fast food restaurant to help his parents and partially pay for his education. Diogo had already established himself as a hardworking and very reliable employee who could be counted on in every way. In early 2017, tragedy struck the Gonalves family. The family head suffered a severe stroke, which left him balancing on the brink of life and death for several weeks. When his condition stabilized, the man remained incapacitated for a long time and was under constant medical supervision. But misfortune does not come alone, and while the father fought for his life, his wife was struck by a car on her way to the hospital. The incident happened suddenly at a pedestrian crossing. As the woman reached the middle of the road, a car appeared out of nowhere at high speed, literally throwing her into the air, and without even braking, sped away. The impact was so forceful that the victim was thrown a dozen meters, sustained an open head injury, and had no chance of survival. Medics arrived within minutes, but they could only declare her death. The driver responsible for the fatal accident was detained the next day, but despite the clear evidence of his guilt, a long and complicated legal battle ensued, as the man had hired a competent lawyer. The unfortunate Diogo, not yet 18, was left completely alone. At that moment, his aunt, the sister of his father, arrived in Albufeira and offered to become the guardian of the teenager and to care for her bedridden brother. However, the relationship between the aunt and her nephew was far from perfect. The authoritative woman dictated her rules, which the young man greatly disliked, and as soon as he reached adulthood, he immediately moved to a rented apartment. Unrequited love. In 2018, a young software specialist was interning at one of the largest tourist spas in the region. His skills and abilities were highly regarded by the management, and he was offered a permanent position with a stable income. Additionally, the sociable, open, and friendly young man quickly integrated into the team and formed friendships with his colleagues. Diogo conscientiously performed his duties and was always ready to help others. At this spa center worked an attractive young woman named Maria Malvero, towards whom the new IT specialist developed tender feelings. He began to court her cautiously, but for the most part, the colleague ignored his advances. Nevertheless, she communicated with him willingly, accepted gifts, but responded to all date invitations with refusals or quickly changed the subject. Diogo unknowingly fell deeply in love with this petite, dark-haired beauty, who held a rather untraditional position as a security service employee. Maria combined strength and femininity. She was approachable yet unattainable. and the young man couldn't resist her. This was his first true love, which proved to be fateful for him. Maria, the complicated Maria Malvero, a year older than Diogo, was also a native of Albufeira and came from a very modest family. She never knew her biological father, as he left when she was very young and subsequently showed no interest in her fate or provided financial support. Maria was raised by her mother and grandmother, but her grandmother passed away a few years ago, and her mother was diagnosed with a severe mental disorder and placed in a specialized clinic. From a young age, Maria understood that she could only rely on herself, and thus she strived to make her way in life. She was seriously involved in sports from school, strong and physically developed, while maintaining a delicate and graceful appearance. In high school, she took up jiu-jitsu and even earned a blue belt. Malvero dreamed of a career in law enforcement, but due to her mother's mental condition, she was denied admission to the police academy, which greatly upset her. Instead, she underwent special training, becoming a professional security officer, and was accepted into the security department of the spa center. Maria's salary barely covered the essentials, as she had to pay for the treatment and care of her ailing mother, whose condition was deteriorating. Nonetheless, the young woman did not despair. She remained optimistic about the future and was kind and friendly with those around her. However, the infatuated Diogo misinterpreted her politeness as reciprocal interest. He even turned down a promising job offer in the capital because he hoped to win Maria's love and did not want to be away from her. The young man spent a third of his salary on his beloved, buying her gifts and taking her to restaurants and amusement parks. They soon appeared to be a happy couple, yet throughout their time together, Maria never once allowed him a kiss. However, as it turned out, her reserve was not due to excessive modesty or shyness. One day, Diogo stumbled upon a short video on social media where his beloved was hugging and kissing another girl. It turned out she had been in a romantic relationship with 23-year-old Mariana Fanesco for over a year. Devastated, Diogo confronted Maria, asking why she had not been upfront with him, but she replied that she preferred to keep her personal life private. Despite such a revelation, Gonçalves continued his courtship, never giving up hope that one day she might reciprocate his love. The greed for easy gain Mariana Fanesco also came from a humble background and received no financial support from her family. She graduated from a nursing college and worked as a basic nurse at a local hospital. She and Maria dreamed of renting a place together to live, but their modest incomes and the need to support their families made this impossible. In January 2020, when Diogo once again invited Maria to dinner at a restaurant, he mentioned that the court case against the driver who fatally struck his mother had just concluded. The driver was found guilty and ordered to pay a substantial compensation of 100,000 euros, which had been transferred to Diogo's account that very day. Diogo spoke about it dispassionately, even with sadness, as no amount of money could bring back his closest person, and he didn't notice Maria's eyes light up when she heard the news. From that moment, their relationship unexpectedly progressed to a new level for Diogo. Maria began showing interest in him and even tenderly held his hand during walks, something she had never done before. Gonçalves couldn't believe his luck, feeling as though his deepest dream was coming true, but he did not ponder why this was happening or what caused such sudden and drastic changes in Maria's behavior. He simply enjoyed the moments, believing Maria's feelings for him were genuine. In reality, as soon as Malvero learned about the money Diogo had received, she shared the news with Fanesco, and together they started planning how to seize these funds. Initially, they needed to make Diogo believe that Maria had finally noticed him as a man and reciprocated his affection. Then, the women planned to use either deceit or force to take the money from the young man and escape to another country, where they could start a new life with the stolen funds. A romantic evening turns into a brutal encounter. One day, Maria approached Diogo unexpectedly and suggested spending a romantic evening together. She mentioned that perhaps their relationship could reach a new level, that they could become a couple, and that something might develop between them. At that moment, Diogo was truly happy, and the sudden changes in the girl's behavior did not alarm him. He believed in the sincerity of her feelings. The long-awaited meeting was set for the evening of Friday, March 20th, 2020, at Diogo's rented apartment. The young man himself prepared dinner, set a table for two, bought flowers and a small gift for his beloved. Maria arrived around 8 o'clock in the evening. They sat down at the table, and she poured a fruit fresh that she had brought, urging Diogo to drink all of its contents to appreciate the taste of the beverage she had prepared. Without hesitation, he did so, unaware that the juice contained a high dose of a potent sedative that Mariana had obtained from her workplace. Soon, Diogo felt unwell. His head was spinning, everything before his eyes blurred, and he felt sleepy. He realized something was wrong and became very nervous, trying to reach his phone, but Maria snatched the device from his hands, saying she wanted to perform an erotic dance for him. She turned on the music, began to slowly undress, and the young man seemed to calm down a bit. Then she tied him to a chair, presenting it as part of the game. At some point, Diogo panicked, tried to free himself, but fell to the floor along with the chair. Seeing Maria simply watching the events unfold, he began to scream and call for help, hoping that the neighbors could hear him. Then, she pressed on his neck, after which the young man lost consciousness. After this, she called Mariana, who had been waiting in a car parked nearby, ready for a signal. When Finesco entered the apartment, she saw Diogo lying on the floor and asked what had happened. Maria explained that the dosage of the drug had apparently been too small, and Diogo had not fallen asleep but started to panic and scream. The girls noticed that he was not breathing and decided to untie him, and Mariana, using her skills, began CPR. When Diogo regained consciousness, he again began to scream, tried to resist and ran out of the apartment. But Maria, using her martial arts skills, knocked him down and performed a chokehold. A few minutes later, Gonsalves showed no signs of life, and the friends did not attempt to revive him further. The imperfect crime. Using fingerprints and Face ID, the girls managed to unlock the deceased young man's phone and access his banking app. They transferred all his available funds to Maria's account, and then pondered how to dispose of the body to delay its discovery as long as possible. Knowing that Gonsalves was expected at work the next day, Malvero decided to send a message from his phone to his boss, requesting time off due to sudden family issues. This message surprised his boss, as during his tenure, the programmer had never asked for time off, been late, or swapped shifts. The boss tried to call the employee to find out what was happening, but all calls were rejected, followed by a message from Diogo claiming he couldn't talk right now. On Saturday, still contemplating what to do with the body, the culprits went to a large shopping mall where they spent some of the money they had stolen from the victim. Surveillance camera footage showed them behaving casually, making purchases, eating at the food court, and smiling as they chatted. They did not appear tense and clearly believed they could evade accountability. Returning to the apartment, the friends decided to sever Diogo's thumb so they could unlock his phone if needed to send messages on his behalf. It was at that moment they realized the best course would be to dismember the body and scatter it in various places, staging the young man's disappearance as if he had taken his own life. They bought plastic wrap and large trash bags, and using a kitchen cleaver and knives, separated the limbs and head from the torso. Mariana's knowledge of human anatomy proved quite useful during this gruesome task. The friends then packed all the parts into 4 bags, which they carried out of the apartment late at night and loaded into the trunk of Diogo's car. Maria drove the car of her deceased admirer, followed by her accomplice in her own vehicle. They drove out of town to a cliff where they dropped the bag containing the torso off the edge, leaving the car near the cliff to make it look as though the young man had jumped. However, they failed to notice that the body did not sink, but got stuck in a crevice at the base of the cliff, They then drove a few miles to a wooded slope where they threw out the head and discarded the victim's limbs over a small waterfall. Body parts on the coast. That Saturday, the management of the spa center reported the employee's disappearance to the police, mentioning the strange messages sent from his number. However, the search for the young man did not start until Sunday, a full day after the disappearance was reported. The first discovery was his car at the cliff's edge, and initially, it was presumed he had taken his own life. But just a few hours later, authorities found a torso in a bag in the crevice below, which was soon confirmed to be Gonsalves through forensic analysis. The same day, a group of tourists reported to the police that they had found a torn bag containing a human head. The limbs were only found several days later, after extensive searches involving divers. The crime scene was horrific, but according to colleagues and friends of the deceased, he had no enemies, was kind-hearted, never broke the law, and did not associate with people who had criminal records or were linked to criminal activities. But who then could have brutally taken the life of such a quiet and friendly young man? The investigation, arrest, and initial court decision. From the early stages of the investigation, it was discovered that the young man had recently received a significant amount of money in his account as compensation from a court decision. However, it was found that mysteriously, this money had been transferred to Diogo's colleague, Maria. She was interrogated as she and Mariana were about to leave the country through the airport. Malvero was caught off guard. She did not expect the police to track them down within just a few days. She confessed immediately, claiming that she committed the crime because her colleague had pursued her and tried to coerce her into intimacy. She also asserted that she had planned and executed the crime on her own, insisting her partner had no involvement. Nonetheless, both women were detained and taken to the station to give their statements. Maria insisted that she had accidentally strangled the young man after he tried to force her into intimacy. However, Diogo's colleagues maintained that he would never treat a woman he liked in such a manner, a sentiment supported by the correspondence between the victim and the accused. Additionally, a high concentration of a potent sedative found in the victim's blood suggested that he was incapacitated at the time of his death. Maria then tried to take full responsibility again, claiming she had committed the crime for the money. She alleged that Mariana was unaware, and when the incident occurred, she even tried to perform CPR on the young man. Mariana, however, contended that they had planned the theft together, intending only to transfer the money to their account and then flee, but that things did not go as planned. There was no doubt about the guilt of the women, but determining their exact roles in the crime proved challenging. Both pleaded to be placed in the same jail during the investigation so they could at least see each other, but despite their requests, they were placed in separate detention facilities, denying them any communication or contact. The trial began in July 2020. Despite Malvero's persistent claims of sole responsibility, investigators doubted she acted alone, questioning how she could skillfully dismember a body without anatomical knowledge. A 6-month period was allotted for the investigation to gather all relevant circumstances, evidence, and testimony. Throughout this time, the suspects had no contact with each other, and the case took an unexpected turn. At a hearing in February 2021, when Maria again claimed full responsibility, Mariana simply confirmed her statements, declaring she had no involvement in the murder or robbery. Maria's lover's behavior seemingly dismayed her, and a month later, Malvero changed her initial testimony. She now claimed that she acted under Mariana's direction, who was the crime's mastermind, and noted that it was her friend who dismembered the body because she knew how to do it best. Maria added that she had initially taken the blame to protect her loved one, but realized that her friend had never truly loved her. Despite Malvero's altered testimony in April 2021, the court found her guilty of premeditated murder, mutilation of a body, robbery, and carjacking. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Mariana, as an accomplice, received a 4-year sentence, but was released on parole in less than a year. The court believed her attempts to perform CPR indicated that she had not intended to take his life and wanted to help. A new trial and an unexpected twist. After being released, Mariana Finesco agreed to give an interview to a local TV channel, a decision that proved to be a grave mistake. During the interview, she placed all the blame on her already incarcerated friend, all the while smiling and appearing very self-satisfied. Shortly after the video became public, a well-known psychologist analyzed it, explaining how gestures, facial expressions, and body language can indicate deception. He suggested that Mariana was reveling in her impunity and sense of superiority, indicating she was a seed manipulator capable of shifting all blame onto someone else. A month after her release, Finesco sued the hospital where she had previously worked, claiming she had been wrongfully terminated and demanded a significant amount as moral compensation. Surprisingly, the court sided with her, ordering the hospital management to reinstate her and pay the compensation she sought. It seemed that everything was going exceptionally well for Mariana. She was free, back at her job, and had received 40,000 euros in moral compensation. However, news soon came from the prison that Maria had taken her own life by hanging herself with a bedsheet in her cell. She left behind a note detailing aspects of Diogo's perpetration that implicated her friend. Following this incident, the case was reopened, and the victim's father filed an appeal, insisting that Finesco was as guilty as her accomplice. The Supreme Court only delivered the final verdict in June 2023, finding Mariana guilty of planning and carrying out the murder of Gonçalves, as well as dismembering his body and carjacking. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of early release. Since then, she and her lawyer have attempted to file appeals twice, but so far all their appeals have been rejected. The discovery of Paige Bergfeld's car was the beginning of a mysterious story that began on the first Sunday of July 2007. On that day, a red Ford Focus that belonged to the missing Paige was discovered. However, the location where the car was found and its condition raised many questions and raised serious suspicions. The car was located in a remote area that Paige did not normally visit. Moreover, it was completely engulfed in flames of fire, suggesting that something terrible and strange had happened. The county district attorney of the county had been looking into what had happened with special scrutiny, and his preliminary findings indicated that the fire around the car was intentional. The conclusion was supported by the fact that nothing else had burned in the area. The unusual incident involving Paige Bergfeld's car was only the beginning of a much more complicated story. June 28, 2007 was a day that will always be remembered by Paige's family and friends. On this ordinary day, the young woman left her 3 children with friend Carol Linder home and left early in the morning. Nothing portended trouble, and no one could have imagined what would soon happen. Paige was a responsible mother and always called or came to pick up her children on time. Morning came, but Paige never returned to pick up her children. Attentive friends and relatives began trying to contact her, but all to no avail. 8-year-old Jez, the eldest of her children, took the initiative in searching for the missing woman. After sending several messages to her mom's phone and getting no response, she insisted on searching. With Carol, they went to the police station, where Jez reported that her mom had not returned for her. This call to the police was a key point in the beginning of the police investigation and search for Paige Bergfeld. With each passing hour, the concern of Paige's loved ones only grew. The community was shocked by this mysterious disappearance, and many were willing to make every effort to help in the search for Paige. Thus began a massive public search operation to return this young woman to her children and loved ones. That same day, the missing woman's father, Frank Bergfeld, received a disturbing call from an official with the sheriff's department. The message was brief and shocking. His daughter had disappeared. It became clear to Frank that something serious had happened. He tried to contact Paige, but there was no response. Terrified and desperate, Frank called his oldest son, Craig, who was on the other side of the country. Craig didn't hesitate to buy a one-way ticket and arrived in town, ready to help in the search for his sister. Family and loved ones joined forces with police and volunteers to begin a massive search. People from different neighborhoods began searching for Paige, combing the surrounding area, checking every corner where they could find any trace of her whereabouts. The police began scrutinizing Paige's history with her loved ones to see if they had anything to do with her disappearance. Of course, authorities turned their attention to Paige's relationship with her first husband, Howard Bigler. The story of that relationship began during her high school years. After graduating from high school, Paige enrolled in nursing school at the University of Florida, where she met a young man named Howard Bigler. Their feelings for each other proved to be mutual, and they began dating. After successfully earning her nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado. There, she continued to live with her family, but after some time, in 1995, she and Howard Bigler got married. At first glance, the spouses seemed to be a happy couple. They had many common interests and views on life. However, there was one significant rift in their relationship that eventually led to divorce. Paige dreamed of a child and wanted a family, however, Howard did not share her desire. The issue became a cause for arguments and conversations on numerous occasions. None of the attempts to find a compromise was not successful, and in 1997 the couple decided to part ways. Nevertheless, despite the divorce, their connection was strong, and the former spouses remained friends. Paige later married Rob Dixon, but their marriage also ended in divorce. After her divorce from Rob, Paige resumed communication with Howard. The missing woman's first husband claimed that he was one of the last people to see Paige alive.
On the 28th, they met up in Eagle County, Colorado. It was due to personal business. There, they spent Thursday together. The former spouses then returned to their respective cities. Howard confirmed that they continued to communicate by phone after the meeting. Also, upon learning of Paige's disappearance, Howard immediately contacted emergency services. While speaking to the operator, he expressed his deep concern and belief that something terrible had happened to Paige. He noted that she would never leave her children without a good reason. The phone recording was corroborated by cell tower data, showing that on the day Paige disappeared, Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area, which is several hours away from where she disappeared. This gave police officers reason to remove Howard from the list of suspects. Police began to scrupulously examine Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and quickly uncovered many events that raised questions and warranted further investigation. It turned out that during their marriage, Paige had reported Rob to the police twice for harassment. After her divorce from her first husband, Paige took a job at a strip club in Denver, where she met Rob Dixon. The man was a wealthy man who had inherited a large fortune through his family's business. Having fallen in love with each other, Paige and Rob did not hesitate, and in 1998 entered into marriage. The family settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige fulfilled her dream of becoming a mother. A few years later, the couple already had 3 children, which became for the young mom the most important thing in her life. The first years of marriage seemed happy. Paige and Rob were immersed in the world of luxury, leading a well-to-do lifestyle. Suddenly, however, things began to fall apart, and the reason for this was due to the financial difficulties Rob was facing. Some of his family's businesses had serious problems, and as a result, the economic situation in the family deteriorated so much that Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy. The financial collapse led to a deep family crisis. By 2004, family tensions had reached such a point that Paige contacted emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and the children, but by the time the police arrived, she and Rob claimed to have worked through their problems on their own. A year later, there was a second incident that was quite different. Paige reported Rob for assault while claiming that he hit her while she was holding her youngest child. This time, Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and Rob avoided jail time. The relationship between husband and wife was getting worse, and they decided to separate, after which Rob moved to Pennsylvania. Investigators interviewed Rob in an attempt to establish his alibi for the day Paige disappeared. Rob claimed that he was in his home and could not have harmed her. Ruling out his involvement in the disappearance, investigators could not. Rob eventually joined the search and was very active in trying to find Paige. Investigating officers spared no effort in an effort to find any clues to unravel this mysterious story and track down the missing mother. One of the first steps was a thorough examination of Paige's car. Based on the assumption that evidence could be found in the car that would help locate the woman, or at least understand what happened to her. Sergeant Weiler of the County Sheriff's Department said that arson is often used to destroy potential evidence. However, an examination of the vehicle provided experts with very valuable information. The driver's seat had been pushed back as far as it would go, indicating that the last person to drive the Ford was a tall man. Paige was short and couldn't have reached the pedals from that distance. In the trunk of the car, they found the missing woman's notebook, from which pages from June 26th through June 29th had been torn out. With each passing hour, the search for Paige grew more desperate. A few days after the burning car was discovered, a random driver stopped on a highway southeast of town for tire problems. A checkbook lying nearby caught his eye, and he immediately reported it to the authorities. While investigating that stretch of road, medical records, insurance cards, and other items belonging to Paige were also found. Sergeant Weiler discovered that several pages in the checkbook had been torn out,
and the items were scattered a considerable distance apart. Most significant, however, was a business card found on the road. It became the key to revisiting the investigation. It turned out that Paige led a secret life that her loved ones had no idea about. According to the business card, the woman was an escort under the alias Carrie. This discovery called into question all previous assumptions in the investigation of Paige Bergfeld's disappearance. From that moment on, police officers were faced with new circumstances they had not even realized. After her divorce, Paige realized that from now on, she would have to work and earn as much as she could to provide for her children and meet their needs. She took a determined approach and started her own children's clothing business. At the same time, she taught dance lessons and sold kitchen supplies at a company. Despite her busy schedule, Paige always made time for her children, attended parent-teacher association meetings, and was active in school groups. A new discovery by the police turned the previous picture upside down. It turned out that Paige led a completely secretive life. She had a separate phone at her disposal, which she used for calls related to her professional activities. This phone became the key to unraveling a mystery that was far more complicated than even Paige's close friends and family could have imagined. Investigators' questions only multiplied. Why did such a conscientious mother and successful businesswoman decide to lead a double life? What did this secret profession have to do with her disappearance? All these questions became a priority in the investigation and added a new mystery to the investigation. Using a cell phone found in Paige's car, detectives accessed a list of contacts and calls made and received in the hours before the young woman's disappearance. The last call from that phone was made on June 28th at approximately 9 p.m. As a result of analyzing this information, 7 people were identified as suspects, and one of them was Lester Ralph Jones. Lester Jones's criminal history drew particular attention from investigators. He had a history of violence against a woman and kidnapping on his record. For the latter incident, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, that was not the only thing that alerted the police. His car was white in color, and from the external description was very similar to the car seen by Carol, Paige's friend. Carol shared important information with the detectives. She recounted an incident where Paige approached her car one day and saw another white car nearby that was blocking her driveway. Outraged, she got behind the wheel to turn around and drive away, but the cars collided, except that the unknown driver immediately fled the scene. With this information, investigators speculated that Lester may have been obsessed with Paige and following her. Further investigation revealed that Lester Jones attempted to make an appointment with Paige for intimate services the day before she disappeared. Lester was questioned and denied having any information about Paige's disappearance. He provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, many suspicious items were found in Lester's home, including a disposable cell phone, men's wigs, Viagra, a sheet with the phone number of an escort service, and women's lingerie in various sizes. The disposable cell phone attracted particular attention from investigators. Analysis of call records on Paige's cell phone showed that on the day of her disappearance, someone tried to contact her several times from an unregistered number. Lester denied under questioning that he had a second cell phone. This meant he lied to the police. Using the packaging found at Lester's home, police were able to determine that the phone had nevertheless been purchased at a supermarket on North Avenue. Video footage from the store identified Lester as the purchaser. When he was shown the video footage, he refused to acknowledge that it depicted him. As a result of all this, Lester Jones became the prime suspect in Paige's disappearance. With no concrete evidence pointing to his guilt, the police continued to follow him and attempted to find Paige's body in order to have enough evidence to press charges. Case was put on hold for several years, and all the while, the young woman's family and loved ones were at a loss for grief. No one knew what had happened to the young mother, and the search seemed hopeless. As time went on, the hope that Paige would be found alive was dwindling. That all changed in 2012, when a hiker accidentally stumbled upon human remains in a ravine among rocks and bushes in Delta County. The find was discovered very close to the road where Paige's personal belongings had been found 5 years earlier. Experts who arrived on the scene were almost certain that it was the body of a young mother. The experts ran a DNA test, and the results confirmed that it was Paige. She was found, but it was a grisly end to her story. The exact cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the body, but it was found that Paige had been struck many times as several of her bones were broken, particularly the bones in her face. As a result, it was determined that she died from injuries sustained during the beating. This information added to the horrific drama of the story. Paige's body was underground, and due to years of soil erosion, ended up on the surface. This may explain why she was not discovered earlier. Lester Ralph Jones's case came to a halt for several years after Paige's remains were discovered. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. However, the trial didn't begin until July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors argued that Lester, who already had a history of violence against women, was frustrated at not being able to see Paige after trying to get an appointment with her. The main witness for the prosecution was Lester's ex-wife, Lisa. She recounted how the man kidnapped her and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s. According to Lisa, Lester could not reconcile with her decision to break up with him. On one occasion, he attacked the couple with a gun in his hands, and Lisa's partner was shot in the head. A month later, Lester threatened her again, telling her that she would now end up at the bottom of a lake. However, the woman managed to escape and contacted police, leading to Lester's arrest on kidnapping and assault charges. Lester's defense attorneys tried to argue that the police detained an innocent man and suggested that Paige's other potential clients may have also had a motive for the crime. However, they did not present convincing evidence linking other individuals to the murder. Lester's current spouse also appeared before the jury and argued that although he used an escort service, she did not abandon her husband because of her faith. However, she did not provide him with an alibi and identified him from a surveillance video at a supermarket where Lester was buying a disposable phone. On September 9, 2016, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, and the first trial was declared a mistrial. However, the district attorney was convinced of Lester's guilt and wasn't about to give up. Over the next few days, he worked diligently on the investigation and re-examined all the evidence. On November 21, 2016, after reviewing the evidence, the jury finally reached a verdict. Lester was found guilty of all charges in connection with Paige's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. The defense appealed the sentence, but in June 2022, an appeals court panel upheld the sentence and affirmed Lester's guilt. Paige's final farewell was held on April 28, 2012. Her obituary dedicated beautiful words to her, describing her as a beautiful and radiant woman whose smile could be compared to the sun. Her tragic loss has left its mark on the hearts of her family and friends. Her 3 children were orphaned and had to endure the loss of their mother, who had always been their support and encouragement. Paige's case attracted public attention and dragged on for many years, but still the persistence and perseverance of relatives and law enforcement finally brought justice. Lester Ralph Jones was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now he will no longer be able to harm other people. Paige's story serves as a reminder of the importance of endeavoring to fight for justice, even if it takes a lot of time and effort. Her memory will live on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel. There are many shocking stories on around the world ahead.